Welcome back to the High School Bekius program. Today we're doing Moed and Moed Katan. Today's Gemara is all about marking off that there's graves in some areas, some tumah, so the Kohen shouldn't become tumah when they walk over certain areas. So if you see lime on the stone, then you can assume there's tumah underneath, and it's between two stones. Well, then you can assume it's also between those stones. There's going to be tumah underneath it. We'll discuss some details in the Gemara, and then we also have an idea about uprooting kilayim. For the benefit of Klal Yisrael, people go out on Chol Moed and uproot the kilayim. And the brisa that we're going to see in the Gemara tells us also on the first of Adar they do the same thing. And lastly, we're going to talk about two takanas about when they uprooted kilayim, exactly how much of it they uprooted and what they did with the stuff after they uprooted it. You always have to make sure before you're going to permit a field. You can't just see if there's trees and say, oh, there must be something plowed over. You have to double check that a wise person or Talmid Chacham in the area knows what's going on and can tell you, verify that this was actually not a field of tumah. You see from here that a Talmid Chacham is in the city. It's upon his shoulders the responsibility to deal with all the things of this town. Mata means town. Alei Ramya is thrown upon him. Why is it his responsibility? Because he knows the halakha is supposed to help out the people, and that's what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. You should ask a zaken who knows the history, or a talmid who's supposed to take the responsibility, make sure things are not tamei. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. If you see a stone that has some lime on it, you see it's marked off. Obviously, there's tumah underneath it. Two racks. Two racks with some lime in between them, well, you can assume there's tumah even between them. If there's no lime between them, all then b'neim tar. That the rocks are tummy, but between them there's no tumah. Avogat the lake of Chorish. Even if there's no space that they could plow in between them all because they didn't mark it off. So Mustama, there is no tumah over there. Wait a minute, the Brisa tells us a different rule. If there's one stone with some lime on it, then you assume there's tumah. If there's two stones with lime on it, then you assume there's tumah between both of them. Unless if there's enough to plow in between them, well, then you could assume they plowed and then it's tar. But if not, if they didn't plow over there, well, then it's going to be tamei. That contradicts what we said before from Rabbi Yehuda. But there's lime spilled on the top and it's like splashing off on the sides. There's a little bit peeling off on each side. So then you could assume that there probably is some tumah in between, unless it was plowed. Sorry, the other way around. Once it's peeling off and there's enough to plow, you could assume that it fell off because of the plow. They tried plowing over there and then they scraped off some of the lime, and therefore there is no tumah over there. Because there was a plow that just peeled off some of the paint and some of the lime from the stones, and therefore there's no tumah. It wasn't plowed over tumah. There's just no tumah at all. And the fact that there's some lime falling off, scraped off, is just because of the plow. If there's no plow, well then if they're just scraped off tumah and dripping down, you can assume there really is lime dripping down. That means there really is tumah between them, and that makes it tumah. If you have a field that has one side that's marked off as having tumah with lime, well, then you can assume that the rest of the field is tummy. That spot is tummy, but everything else is fine. Shnayim. Well, if you have two borders of a field that now are marked off, same thing, same story. Everything else is fine besides those borders. Same thing with three. When you get to four, well, then we assume everything inside of the field is tamei, but the border itself is actually tar, because they wanted they wanted to make a border of tumah so that the Kohen should step on it, so the exact border is actually tar, but they didn't make the border very far from the tumah, and therefore you can assume there's tumah right inside of the border. We go out and climb to remove the climb. Do we actually go out for Chol Moed to uproot the Kalim? Or Minhu, but we have an advice about we make announcements about collecting the new Shkalim for the next year, and that the Kalim is also to plant intermixed species, and that we're going to uproot them if people don't listen, and they do plant intermixed species in their fields. So we're going to uproot them on the 15th of Adar, in the 15th of the month, they read the Megillah in the walled cities. We go and repair the small paths, the big streets. We're going to fix Lamona Mikvos, to measure the mikvahs. We build all the public needs. We mark off the graves. We go on to uproot the intermixed species. So do we go on Kalayim for a Chol Moed to uproot them, or we go on the Purim, 15th of Adar, or Shushan Purim, to uproot the Kalayim? Which one? Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Yossi, two Amoraim discuss this. One answer is the early crop versus the late crop. Early crop is dealing with in Adar, we uproot it, and the late crop in Chol Moed of Nisan, in Pesach Chol Moed. The other answer is that the plants are the early month, and the other one is the vegetables. Those are taken care of in Chol Moed Nisan, Chol Moed in Pesach Nisan. Rashi deals with, well, why don't we ask about the other things that we fix up on Chol Moed, like the streets and the mikvahs and the kvaros, and we also deal with that on Shushan Purim. Which one is it? Rashi says, well, you can fix things twice. Things get broken all the time. This is only saying that we wouldn't deal with it except for Chol Moed if it's not obvious that these plants are growing and they're small. But if there's a big growth of Kalayim that's sprouted up and it's clear, well, then it's recognizable. We were going to take care of it even earlier in the Chol Moed. Why do we do it in a Chol Moed? Because it's cheaper to get people to work on Chol Moed, because no one's going to work. You're not supposed to work on Chol Moed. So then people are ready to work for the rabbim, for the needs of the rabbim. So the rabbim, the public facilities will pay for it, and it's cheaper to get work done. You see that we pay from it for public funds, from collected funds of the Lishka. A certain chamber of the Beis HaMikdash would collect money, and it was spent on the uprooting the Kalayim of Chol Moed, and they would try to get the cheapest deal they could for work, so they would do it on Chol Moed. If each person who had a field had to pay for people to uproot their Kalayim, whenever he wants, he should do it. Why do we bedavka find a cheap time? Ad kama. How much is allowed before we'd have to uproot it? If there's a saw, a certain volume quantity of plants in a certain area, rova, zera, min, achar, you might, if they're in every saw, there's just a little bit of a rova, of a zera, a rova, a kav, 1/24th of zera. So 1 to 24 ratio, if you have a little bit of that, of the other plant species mixed in, you have to remove it to minimize it. And the first verse we're telling you is just minimize. And the second one we're saying, take the whole field, mafkir everything, make it ownerless, and it's going to cause a major loss to the owner. Well, which one is it? Do we uproot it, or do we make everything after and make him have a major loss? Look, it was before they made an enactment and afterwards. This time, here's the story. Originally, they would uproot the Kalayim and throw it in front of the animals of the owner. And the owner would be very happy. So first of all, they'd be happy they uprooted all the weeds, all things that didn't belong, all the intermixed species. And also they were feeding their animals. So then they said, we're not doing that, because they're doing avir by leaving Kalayim in their fields. We're going to uproot it and throw it in the streets. They were still happy because they were de-weeding the field. Well, then they made an enactment that they should just uproot it and then make the whole thing ownerless, and it'd be a major loss for the owners.